Hello, my name is David Pawson, and I write books, but all the books I write are about the Bible and about Christian truth. I have a passion to share the truth with people because it's the truth that sets people free. Now then, this book, called The Road to Hell, has been very seriously misunderstood. An advertisement appeared in a national Christian magazine. Read David Pawson's autobiography, The Road to Hell, as if this was my life story. But it wasn't. I think they'd only read the introduction because that is a bit about myself. But I was concerned that I was hearing preachers say that there's no such thing as eternal torment in hell. And you know, when this book came out, I was interviewed on British radio, BBC, and the interviewer always asked the same question: how can a God of love send anybody to hell? And I would always come back with a question to the interviewer. I learned that technique from Jesus: answer a question with a question, and the ball goes back into the other court. And I used to say, well, where did you get the idea that God was a God of love? And that really shook them, that a Christian should say things like that. And they would say, well, didn't Jesus say that? Isn't that Christian belief? And I would say, well, as a matter of fact, it is Christian belief. But I said, I learned everything about hell from the same person from whom I learned about the love of God, and that was Jesus himself. In the whole Bible, the only person who talks about hell is Jesus. And he said some pretty strong things about it. And one of the shocks that I had when I studied his teaching on hell was this: that all but two of his warnings about hell were directed to his own disciples. Now, you thought he was going to say sinners are going to hell, but it was to his own followers who'd committed their lives to him that he said, now you be afraid of him who can throw body and soul into hell. And most of the warnings about hell that Jesus gave were given to his own disciples, those who were committed to him. So above all, Christians need to be afraid of hell. Paul said that having preached to others, he was afraid of being disqualified himself at the end. And I share that fear. I can only talk to others about hell because I fear going there myself. And therefore, I'm not one of those who can say, all you non-Christians are going to hell and I'm not. I'm not under any risk, but I am. Because hell is there and it's real. And though we use it as a swear word and make jokes about hell and treat it flippantly, the reality doesn't go away. So I wrote this book about hell. And I'll tell you the most amazing story. I write all my books with a fountain pen. I'm really out of Noah's Ark. I think I've not got a computer and I just use a pen. Well, I went away to Italy to speak there, and I took with me in my briefcase the handwritten draft of this book, the only copy. And I'd spent months writing it with ink and tears, because it's a horrible subject to write on. Because you think of relatives and friends who could finish up there, and even yourself. Anyway, I went to an Italian airport. I arrived there at midnight, very dark, pouring rain, and I had a big case with my clothes in, and the briefcase with the notes of what I was going to say at a conference, and this manuscript in the briefcase, which was black leather. The pastor who picked me up at Modena Airport took me to the car park and said, you get in the car, I'll put your luggage in the back. And he put my case in the back and we drove an hour to his home. And when we got there, he lifted out the case and I said, and there's my black leather briefcase as well. No, he said, there was only the one case. And I said, didn't you see the briefcase? I said, all my notes for my conference are in there, and there's the handwritten draft of my new book, The Road to Hell? No, he said, there was just your case. And he'd obviously left the black briefcase on the luggage trolley in the car park, in the dark and the rain, just hadn't seen it. I said, we must go straight back and find it. So we got back in the car, an hour later, back in the airport. No sign of the trolley, no sign of the luggage. I went to the lost property office and said, have you had a briefcase handed in? No. I said to the police, I've lost a briefcase. And the Italian police just looked at me and smiled. So you lost a briefcase in Italy, did you, sir? Obviously not believing that it would come back. Well, the next day, I was driven 100 miles to a town called Rimini on the Adriatic coast, where the conference was held. And I had prayed that night, Lord, if you want that book on hell published, you've got to find it for me and get it back to me. But if you don't bring it back, I'll assume that you don't want it published. And I don't want it published if you don't. That was my prayer. I went out of the hotel the next morning at breakfast for a little walk on the beach. And a man walked up to me outside the hotel and put my briefcase into my hand and walked away. 100 miles from the airport. And I opened it, and the manuscript of this book, handwritten, was all there, but all the pages were in the wrong order. So I feverishly put them in the right order again, and every page was there. And that's how this book came to be published. So I really believe that God wanted this book published, because he brought it back to me. I don't know. Nobody has been able to find out where it had been or how it traveled 100 miles and arrived in my hand the next morning. So in a sense, there's a bit of a miracle behind this little book. God wanted it published, I really believe. And you need to read it, because it's about a very serious subject, hell. It's not fashionable to think about hell or talk about it now. Usually you only hear the word used as a swear word. But we need to think what Jesus said about it. Everything I know about hell came from the lips of Jesus himself. And he's been the most loving person who ever lived. So there cannot be a contradiction between a God of love and hell, not if Jesus thought there wasn't.